In this video, we are going to learn about classes and objects in object-oriented programming. In the previous video, we had learned about the introduction to object-oriented programming, what what object-oriented programming is, and what are its benefits over procedural programming. So let's now learn how to create classes and how to create its object. So let's now learn how to create different classes and how to create objects of these classes. So we'll first learn how to create a class. Okay. A class is defined by using the class key. So you have to use the keyword class followed by the name of the class and a pair of curly braces. All its properties and methods go inside these braces. Properties are called variables and methods are called functions. Just in object oriented programming, the naming has changed. Okay, in procedural programming, we used variables and functions, and here we are naming them as properties and methods. But the operation that they perform is completely same. So no need to get confused about what is properties and everything. In simple language, properties are variables and methods are functions. So here we have the syntax. First use the keyword class, then you can name. Okay, you can name a class any whatever you want. Here I have given the name car, and inside the curly braces we write the our code that is to be executed. Here we have a class named car. A car can have properties like name, color, weight, etc. Right? Yeah, it is quite straightforward. Class Your car can have multiple properties. Car has a name, it has a color, it has a weight, and many more properties. So we can define variables like dollar name, dollar color, and dollar weight to hold the values of these properties. So that's why in easy language, properties are called variables because all the properties of a class are stored inside the variable. When the individual objects like Skoda, Maruti, now individual objects, see, here I have a class called car. Now there are many cars that comes under this, right? We have Honda, we have Mercedes, BMW, and many more cars that we have. Okay, so we can create multiple objects. So let's say I can create one object called Skoda. Now Skoda can have different properties. It can have different functions. Then I can create another object called Maruti, which can have different properties. Okay, so once a class is created, we can create multiple objects of that class, and each object will have its own unique property. So here I can create individual objects like Skoda, Maruti, maybe Honda, Mercedes, BMW, etc. They inherit all the properties and behaviors from the class, but each object will have different values for the properties. Okay, each one of them will have the different properties, right? Because see, each one of them will have a different name, maybe a different color as well. Okay, sometimes similar color as well, but generally majority of the times they have different properties. Okay, so basically here everything is in the object form, right? So you can consider this class as an object in this. Okay, we generally we generally call it an object rather than a class. Okay, so everything is an object in object oriented programming. Okay, so now let's go to the example. Okay, so here I have one example. First we have PHP tags. Okay, opening and closing PHP tags, and inside this I have created a class called car. Now a car can have multiple properties, but for now to just keep it simple, I have taken two properties, name and the color. Okay. Now we have methods. Now methods are nothing but functions that are used to perform some operation on the data, right? So here I have created a function called set name, okay, and it is taking one argument. Inside this, here we have a line of code which some of you may not understand, but just for now, uh, just understand that we are naming this variable. We are assigning a name to this variable, dollar this, and this denotion, this is the name of the variable. Here we are trying to access this variable and we are just assigning a value to it, okay. And we have a function, another function called get name, which is just returning this name to us. Okay, so what will happen is while calling out this function, I will just pass a value, and that value will be stored inside this variable called dollar name, and then that name will be assigned to this variable dollar name, okay, and then that name will be returned to us. So I haven't shown you for now how to call this function, because for that we have to create an object. We cannot simply call out this function. First we have to create the object of this class, and then we can access its properties and methods. But this is the approach. Okay, we have properties and we have methods inside a class. Okay. So let's now move to an IDE. Okay, so we are in Visual Studio Code IDE. So let's code PHP tags. Then let's create a class called car. Inside this, I'll just say these are the properties. So I will say public. For now, don't pay much attention to this keyword public. Okay, I will be explaining you what this keyword actually means. Okay, but for now, just understand we have to use a key. Okay, either we use public or we use private. Then we will write the name of the variable. Let's this, and then we public dollar color. Okay, I have created two properties. Now let's create methods. Function set name. Syntax is completely similar. We have to use a keyword called function followed by the name of the method. Then we have open and close round brackets, and then we have curly. So here what I'll do is, will first, while calling out the function, I will pass a value. So I will take one argument over here. Let's say dollar name. Uh, dollar this. I will be explaining you how this actually works. Okay. Then we have a function called get name, which will just return this name to us. I'll just say return dollar this. Okay. So what happens is when I run this code, nothing will happen. Okay, nothing will happen. I'll just go to the browser because I haven't called any function. For calling a function, firstly, I will have to create an object. So I'll just say localhost slash name of the folder is programming, and then file name is first.py. Okay, so as you can see, nothing happens, okay, because we have just created the properties and methods. We aren't accessing them. In order to access these properties and methods, we need object. Okay, so let's see how to create an object. Okay, define object. Classes are nothing without objects. We just saw now. Without objects, nothing happens, right? We ran the program, but nothing happened. We can create multiple objects from a class. So from one class, we can create as many objects as we want. Like if I have a class called car, so I can have multiple objects. Like first could be Skoda, second could be Maruti, third could be Mercedes, BMW, and the list would go on. Each object has all the properties and methods defined in the class, but they will have different property values. Means all of them has all the properties. Let's say here I have declared two properties, name and color. So every object will have these two properties, but the values will be different. Okay, so they all the objects inherit the properties and methods of its class, but the values are different. Now, object of a class is created using the new keyword. So in order to create an object, we have to use this keyword called new. Okay, so we'll just look at this example. Okay, here we have an example. Okay, so we have PHP tags, okay, opening and closing, and here I have a class called car. Inside this, I have two properties, name and the color, and then I have two methods. Okay, so here this much of code is same. Okay, we have even written the same code in our IDE. So now this is the code that we have to see. Okay, so here what I'm doing is I'm creating an object of this class. In order to create an object, we use the keyword called new followed by the class name. Okay, we are just writing the class name followed by the round bracket. And here I have my object name. Here I have created an object called Skoda. And in the second line, I have created another object called Mercedes using the new keyword. Okay, we use new and class name, then open and close round bracket. Okay, now let's see what happens. Now I'm just taking this object called Skoda and I'm trying to access this method called setName, because as I said, we can access the methods and properties using object. So how to access is we have to use this denotion, hyphen and greater than sign. This is the denotion that we have to use. This is the operator. So object name, then this operator, then the method name is set name, and here I am passing a value called Skoda. So what will happen is when the execution will come at this point, it will say, okay, set name method is called and this value is passed Skoda. So it will go to its function definition. So it will go here. So this Skoda value will be stored inside this variable called dollar name, and then that value will be assigned to this variable called name. This dot. Okay. And then I have same thing I have done using Mercedes object. I'm setting the name as Mercedes. So then when the execution will come at this point, it will again go to its function definition, and now this value will be holding the value Mercedes. Okay, so I'm just saying here echo Skoda get name. Okay, so I will get to see Skoda onto the screen, and then I'm breaking the line and then I'm saying echo dollar Mercedes get name. So I am simply printing out Skoda and Mercedes onto the screen. Okay, so the code might look a bit complex, but let's see this in an IDE and we'll practically see the output so that the confusions become clear. So this much of code is available to us. Now outside this class, we create its objects. Okay, so outside this class, first you can name the object. I will name it as Skoda, and obviously dollar sign is important. Okay. it is mandatory to put a dollar sign in front at the beginning of the object name, because objects are nothing but variables only. Is equal to, we use the keyword called new, followed by the class name is car, and open and close round brackets and then semicolon. So this is the syntax. This is the way we create objects, or I would write creating an object. Okay. So my first object has been created called Skoda. I will create another object called Mercedes. Okay, is equal to new R and then semicolon. Okay, so now I will just I want to access this method because I want to name, I want to assign a value to this variable, and I'm doing that using this method. I'm setting the name to this variable using this method. So I will have to access this method, and that can be done using the object. So I'll say $Skoda, and we have to use this operator in order to access methods or properties of the class. So always we have to make use of this operator, followed by the method name. I want to access this method for now, set name. So I will just write here set name, and then inside this I will pass a value called Skoda. Why? Because this is taking one argument called $name. So this value will be stored inside this variable, and then that value will be assigned to this variable called name. So after the execution, this variable will hold the value as Skoda. Okay. Now similar thing I will do for a Mercedes object as well. Mercedes, then this operator, then set name, set underscore name, and I will pass a value Mercedes. So now we will just print out, we'll just call this method called getName because it is returning us the value that this variable is holding. So in case of Skoda object, it is holding the value called Skoda, and in case of Mercedes object, it is holding a value Mercedes. Okay, so we'll print both. So I'll just say $Skoda, then we use this operator, then get this whole name. I'll simply call this. Now I'll just break the line echo here and echo $Mercedes and get name. Okay. So now we will get Skoda and Mercedes onto the screen. Okay. Let's see. Just go to the browser and we'll reload it. Let's see what happens. Okay, so as you can see, Skoda and Mercedes has been printed onto the screen. We have Skoda, we have Mercedes. Okay, so we can create as many objects as we want, and each object has its own unique properties. Means property. Okay, so we can create as many objects as I want, and each object will inherit the same properties and the same methods, but the values will be different. As we have seen, Skoda object is containing the value called Skoda, and this object called Mercedes is holding the value as Mercedes. Okay, so now let's move to PT. Okay, so now we were using the keyword called this. So now let's understand what this keyword is all about. The $this keyword refers to the current object. Current object means the current class, and is only available inside methods. See, as we have seen, we used this keyword inside the method. Okay, so here I have an example. we have a class called car and we have one property called dollar name. Now I'm simply creating the object of this class. So where can we change the value of the dollar name property? Okay, so how can I change the value? Okay, if I want to assign the value to this variable, how can I do it? So there are two ways. Okay, so let's see. First is inside the class by adding a method and using $this. So in this case I will just show you. Here we made use of methods and we used this keyword to name this, to assign a value. Okay. So again, let's go to PPT. Okay. So here I have a class. I have one property called dollar name and I have created a method called set name, which is actually assigning a value to this variable. Now dollar this refers to the current class. Now if I want to access any property from a method, now this is inside a method, but if I want to access this variable inside this method, then I make use of dollar this keyword. So through this keyword I can access these properties inside this method. So remember, this refers to the current class, means all the properties of the current class. So that's why I made use of this keyword, so that I can use all these properties inside this method. And while calling out this method, I just passed a value called Skoda Rapid, which will be stored inside this variable called dollar name. And then I'm just assigning this value to this variable. Now, one thing to note is when I use this keyword called dollar, there's no need to put a dollar sign in front of the variable name. Okay, this is how the syntax is. And we make use of this operator called hyphen and greater than sign. Every time we are making using of this operator only, so keep that in mind. So basically dollar this keyword is just to access all the properties, or in easy language, all the variables inside a method. Okay. So yeah, and that was one approach. And the second approach is outside the class. See, I can name this or I can assign a value to this variable outside of a class as well, by directly changing the property value. See, I created the object and then through the object I can simply access the property and can name it. Okay, so there are two ways, directly through the object or through the method. So it depends on the personal choice and the circumstances as well. Okay, so this was all about classes and objects in PHP, and these are the most important concepts. That's why I took much time to cover them. And in the further videos, we will be learning about properties, methods, and constants in detail. Okay, so thank you.